So far as we've looked at the different endings of the participle and the way that we form the participle in different tenses, we've only talked about two of its functions. Generally speaking, we've looked at the attributive, that is when the participle works like a true adjective, and the predicate, when the participle completes a verbal phrase with the verb to be. We've seen the substantive in one case, but I don't think that I pointed it out, and we have not yet entered into the world of the circumstantial. The circumstantial, in fact, is one of the most common use of the participles, and so we'll be spending most of our time this week looking at how that works. As we try to figure out which use of the participle we're dealing with, the definite article and the verb to be are the things that we want to look out for. If we have the definite article followed by a noun and a participle, that's the attributive, where the participle is working like an adjective. If we have the definite article followed by a participle with no noun, this is the substantive, where the participle stands in for a noun. If we have a noun, the verb to be, and a participle, this is the predicate. Remember, this is our John was clothed from Mark 1:6. And finally, if there's no definite article and no verb to be, we're probably dealing with the circumstantial. Two thoughts on the circumstantial participle. First of all, generally speaking, it occurs in one of two cases, the nominative or the genitive. And we'll actually see that in the aorist tense, it's overwhelmingly in the nominative. Second, I want to look at some of the ways in which we can translate the circumstantial in order to make our translation of the participle more graceful than we've done so far. In the present, we'll often add the word while to show that the participle is happening at the same time as the main verb. In the aorist or the perfect, we'll often add the word after to show that the participle happened before the main verb. In all three tenses, if the context demands it, we can add the words because or although. Because if we're showing a reason, or although if we're showing a contrast. And finally, when we're trying to make our participle into good English, we often have to turn it into a verb instead of a relative clause or an adjective phrase. And remember, this applies only to the circumstantial. As I've said, we've concentrated on the attributive up to this point. And with the attributive, the participle describes a noun, and usually this is in conjunction with the definite article. Here we have hoi grammates followed by hoi katabantes. Remember, this is a Greek use where we repeat the definite article to show that we're still talking about the same noun. When we translate the attributive, we often use a relative clause. Who when we're talking about people, that when we're talking about things. In this case, hoi grammates hoi katabantes is the scribes who came down, or the scribes who went down. The predicate, like some of our English past tenses, completes a verbal phrase. It goes with the verb to be. We saw this in Mark 1:6 with John the Baptist. He was clothed in camel hair. Ein, our past tense of the verb to be, and endedoumenos, our perfect middle participle, combine together here to make a verbal idea. The participle, because it's part adjective, can stand in for a noun. This is our substantive use. In this use, it almost always occurs with the definite article. We saw this in Revelation 3:1. Ho echon ta hepta pneumata, the one who holds the seven spirits. Here we don't have a noun, we just have the participle echon. That brings us finally to our new use of the participle this week, the circumstantial. And the circumstantial participle describes the circumstances of the main action of the sentence. If it's describing the circumstances of the subject of the sentence, the participle will be in the nominative, and it will be without the definite article. We see an example of this in Mark 1:31. Pros elthon egeiren autein. Pros elthon is our participle in the aorist active and the masculine nominative singular. It's describing what the subject, in this case Jesus, did before the main verb. And so we can translate it, after he came forward, Jesus raised her up. The circumstance in this case is Jesus coming forward, and the main verb is him raising her up. If we want to give a description of the circumstances of someone other than the subject, we can use the participle in the genitive along with a noun or a pronoun to describe those circumstances. In Matthew 5:1, kathisantos autou pros elthein auto. Pros elthein auto is our main phrase. They came to him. But we want to say something about the him, in this case again, Jesus. And so we say kathisantos autou. These are both in the masculine genitive singular, and kathisantos is our aorist active participle. And so we translate this after he sat down, they, in this case it's the disciples, came to him. Again, we've got a description of the circumstances of someone other than the subject, and we place this in the genitive. In order to make use of our understanding of the circumstantial, we have to pay careful attention and ask ourselves, what is the participle trying to convey? If the main point of the participle is order of events, in the present, which is contemporaneous with the main verb, we could add while. In the aorist or the perfect, both past tenses, we could add after to show that the action of the participle happens before the main verb. If the main point is to give the reason behind an action, we could add because. And if the main point is to show contrast, although would be a way to render this. Let's take a look at a few examples of applying the circumstantial participle. In the first one, from the calling of the disciples in Mark, peripaton edein duo adelphus, peripaton is our present participle. And the point of it here is to give the order of events. It tells us that at the same time as Jesus was peripaton, that is walking, he saw edein, two brothers. And so we could translate it, while walking, he saw two brothers. In the same way, if we have the order of events in the aorist, like the example we just saw, kathisantos autou pros elthein auto, after he sat down, kathisantos, our aorist participle, they came to him. Finally, we can also see a reason behind an action. In the story of the flight to Egypt from the Gospel of Matthew, we have this phrase, akousas hoti archelaos basalue ephobethe. The subject here is Joseph, and he's the one who akousas, he hears. Because he heard, aorist shows that it's a past tense, a tense before the main verb. Because he heard that Archelaus was king, he was afraid. Now that we've had some time to look at these four uses in depth, please take a little bit of time to review the need to know from the beginning of this lecture. I've placed the slides here at the end so you don't have to go back, but take a look at how we identify these four uses and what these four uses do in terms of the grammar of a sentence.